Have you ever thought about how a single, small act of kindness could change someone's life, even when you don't know the person at all? What if your generosity, given without expectation, sets off a chain of events that changes the future not just for them, but for you too? This is a story about a young man whose small acts of kindness led to something much greater than he could have imagined. A story of struggle, sacrifice, redemption, and how good deeds, when planted in the right soil, come back in ways you never expect. Rian was a young man with big dreams. At 22, he was a university student, studying law in a city that never seemed to slow down. Despite his own ambitions, he wasn't like most other students. He wasn't obsessed with grades or internships. He didn't even care much for the usual comforts that many people his age sought. Instead, he was deeply concerned with how he could make a positive difference in the world. It was a belief instilled in him by his parents, who had always told him the smallest act of kindness can echo for a lifetime. Every day, as Rian walked the busy streets toward his campus, he passed the same street corner. There, sitting on a faded cardboard mat, was a woman in her 30s, accompanied by a young girl. The woman's face showed signs of long hardship, her skin was weathered, and her eyes were tired, though they held a quiet resilience. The little girl, no older than 5, sat next to her, clutching a worn-out stuffed animal. They rarely spoke to anyone. Instead, they simply waited, the mother with her outstretched cup and the child silently playing with her toy. At first, Rian's conscience barely registered their existence. Like most people, he walked past them every day, caught up in his own world, consumed by his thoughts and the demands of school. But one particularly chilly morning, something within him stirred as he passed by them again. He had just received a small scholarship for his studies, and while he wasn't rich by any means, he had enough to spare. So, for the first time, he stopped. Without a word, he pulled a few bills from his wallet and gave them to the woman. She looked up at him, startled, then gave him a soft, quiet smile of gratitude. It was a look that made Rian pause, a silent acknowledgement that spoke volumes. No words were exchanged, but in that brief moment, Rian felt something stir inside him. He didn't need her to thank him, he simply knew that his gesture, however small, might help. From that day on, Rian began stopping by every afternoon, handing over whatever he could. Sometimes it was just a few coins, other times, a sandwich or a warm drink. The girl would smile at him every time, her small face lighting up despite their circumstances. The woman, though always reserved, began to nod at him with a silent acknowledgement. They never spoke much, but that didn't matter to Rian. He felt a strange sense of fulfillment in these brief encounters, knowing that he had done something, however small, to help ease their struggle. As the days turned to weeks and weeks to months, Rian's routine continued. He passed the street corner every day, and every day he would stop to give the woman and her daughter something. It wasn't much, but it was consistent. The girl's smile became more familiar, and sometimes she would even wave at him as he approached. Rian didn't need to ask her name, nor did he need to hear her story. He simply knew that they were in need, and that was enough for him. But then, one morning, Rian's heart sank when he didn't see them. He walked by the corner as usual, expecting to see the familiar faces, but there was nothing. No woman. No child. No cardboard mat. His gaze swept across the busy street, scanning for them, but they were nowhere to be found. Days passed, and the empty corner began to haunt him. He waited for the woman and her daughter to return. He didn't know why, but he felt a sense of responsibility toward them. It had become part of his daily routine, and now their absence felt like a missing piece. Perhaps they had moved on to a different part of the city, he thought, or perhaps something had happened to them. But after a week, he stopped seeing them altogether, and the worry in his heart deepened. Rian threw himself into his studies, but even the most demanding lectures and assignments couldn't shake the concern that gnawed at him. He kept wondering if they were okay, if they had found a better situation, or if something worse had befallen them. But life had a way of pushing forward. He graduated with his law degree and quickly found work at a prestigious firm. His days became filled with meetings, cases, and long hours at his desk. The world seemed to grow bigger, and the memory of the woman and her daughter faded into the background of his busy life. Years passed. Rian found success in his career, moving up quickly in the firm, his name becoming known in legal circles. Yet, despite his achievements, there was a quiet emptiness within him, something he couldn't shake. He had everything he had ever worked for, yet there was still a sense of longing, a desire to make a real impact on the world. And then, as fate would have it, he fell ill. It began with fatigue. At first, he thought it was just the stress of work. But then came the headaches, followed by dizziness and weight loss. He went to the doctor, unsure of what was wrong, but no one could figure it out. The tests were inconclusive, and his health continued to deteriorate. Weeks passed, and soon he was bedridden, unable to perform even the simplest tasks. His once thriving career seemed to be slipping through his fingers. Desperation set in. Rian saw specialist after specialist, but no one could give him a clear answer. The fear of the unknown consumed him. What was wrong with him? What was going to happen? One day, as he lay in a hospital bed, he was assigned a new doctor. Her name was Dr. Amora. She entered the room with a calm presence, her dark eyes bright and focused. There was something striking about her, a kind of quiet strength that reminded him of someone, but he couldn't place who. Dr. Amora was methodical, asking Rian questions, listening to his symptoms, and reviewing his medical history with great attention to detail. After a thorough examination, she reassured him that she would get to the bottom of his condition. But there was something about her that caught Rian's attention. Her eyes, her mannerisms, they reminded him of the woman and her daughter from so many years ago. He couldn't put his finger on it, but he felt a sense of recognition. Several days later, as Rian sat in his hospital room, weak and anxious, he gathered the courage to ask, "Dr. Amora, I know this might sound strange, but were you ever, by any chance, the little girl I used to see on the street, sitting with your mother?" Amora paused for a moment, her eyes widening slightly as if surprised. She studied him carefully before a soft smile appeared on her face. "Yes, I was. You were the man who would always stop and give her something. I remember you very clearly." Rian's heart skipped a beat. He stared at her, unsure of what to say. "I had no idea," his voice trembled with emotion. "You were that little girl, and now you're a doctor?" Amora nodded, her expression softening. "Yes, I am. My mother worked tirelessly to get me through school. We were poor, but she always believed that education was the way out. She wanted me to have a better life, and now, here I am, helping people the way I always hoped I could." Rian listened in awe, a lump forming in his throat. All these years, he had never known what had become of them. But now, to hear Amora's story, how her mother had fought so hard for her future, was overwhelming. She had turned her life around through hard work, determination, and yes, the kindness of strangers like him. "She never forgot you," Amora continued, her voice breaking slightly. "My mother always spoke of you. She said you were the one person who showed us kindness when the world seemed so indifferent. Your help gave us hope, even when things seemed hopeless." Rian sat in silence for a moment, the weight of her words sinking in. He had never expected anything in return. In fact, he had given without even thinking about it, but now, hearing the impact of his small gestures, he understood that his kindness had played a pivotal role in Amora's success. Dr. Amora continued to care for Rian over the following weeks. She was methodical in her treatment, ordering tests and adjusting his medications, working tirelessly to uncover the root of his illness. Slowly, Rian began to recover, his health improving as he responded to the treatments. One day, as Rian sat up in bed, feeling stronger than he had in weeks, he turned to Amora. "I owe you my life, don't I?" Amora smiled gently. "No, you don't owe me anything. But I owe you everything. You gave me the chance to have a better life, and now I'm here to give that back to you." The irony of it all wasn't lost on Rian. All those years ago, he had offered small amounts of money, meals, and compassion without thinking. Now, here he was, on the receiving end of a kindness that had come full circle. As Rian left the hospital, fully recovered, he reflected on everything that had transpired. The woman and her daughter had been part of his life in a way he hadn't understood at the time. His small acts of generosity had led to something much greater than he could have ever imagined. Rian understood now that kindness, no matter how small, has the power to change lives. It ripples outward in ways we may never see, but it always finds its way back, often in the most unexpected forms. And so, Rian promised himself that he would never stop helping others, no matter how small the act, knowing that one day, it might come back to him, just as it had with Amora.